Good afternoon, John Verlin with On-Demand Advertising Solutions, and this is Digital Marketing Update. Today I want to share with you 7 critical steps that you need to keep in mind when you launch a new venture or a new startup, a new business. I'm going to share with you today one that I have had several, but back in 1986, my brother and I came together. He had had some recording background as a musician in a rock and roll band, and I was in radio, so it was sort of a natural fit, but we came up with an idea of a product called Listen in Color Bible Stories for Children. I had been a Bible teacher and noticed that a lot of times if you could tell a story, I remember my mom telling me stories, Bible stories, reading them to me as a kid, and I remember I could visualize what was going on just by her describing it to me. So we thought, what if we produced sort of Steven Spielberg that we called, make a stereo 3 to 5 minute recording with actors, sound effects, music, everything. Make a production out of it to tell Bible stories, but not just a few. Let's do the whole Bible. Let's do 110 from the Old Testament all the way through the New Testament. What if we did that? So that started the process of meeting some different people who, the first group that we had met with, actually, we got William Conrad through one of the people that was in that group who played Cannon back in the late 70s, 80s, detective, actually did the narration of it. Unfortunately, there were some things that came out of that we were not able to release it. So several years later, we got a different group, and we got all local narrator and actors and everybody. We had about 22 actors. A local musician friend of my brother's had a little house he made into a recording studio to record his compositions. But we ended up renting that for about 3 months. So we had a couple of years into this, putting it together, writing the scripts, getting the acting, getting everything, and getting it all organized, business plan, long-term vision, everything, before we were able to approach investors. So here are some of the points I want to bring up that you need to keep in mind when you are starting something new. The first is do as much test market research as you can afford before you sink money into funding it, if you're going to do it yourself or get some people involved, because this will produce data. It's hard to do. I mean, it's not easy, but today with all the social media and things like that, you can really do some measurement and feedback as much as you can get, because this will not only minimize risk, but it will show investors you're serious about this, that you have really sunk in either some personal funds, which I recommend not a lot, mainly sweat equity, and the results of this market research should be included in your business plan to convince investors you've discovered a niche or a market. Now, you can see on this blog post some of the images of the product. We had it in a kit, and you can see the pages. We had 6 cassette tapes in stereo with high-quality recording. I'm going to play one just real brief for you here so you can get a sample of it. Let me get it here just a second.
Meanwhile, the man named Saul, who approved of the death of Stephen, was still breathing out murderous threats against Jesus' disciples. Saul was on his way to Damascus to persecute Christians there. He had just started his journey when suddenly a light came from heaven, blinding him. Saul, frightened, fell to the ground and heard a voice.
Saul, why do you persecute me?
Who are you, Lord?
I am Jesus whom you are persecuting. Now get up and go into Damascus. You will be told what to do.
Okay, so that was the first time I've played that tape in 34 years, something like that. So at any rate, that gives you a sampling a little bit of the quality. We had really good actors, quality. You could play this on a home sound system, and when there was an earthquake or something like that, it would shake the room. We use subsonic synthesizer sounds and all sorts of things. So we felt there was a really good chance that this could be successful. But keep in mind, when you do research, now we did a little demo, one story we produced at the radio station I worked at, just to give the investors a sampling of it, which they liked. Okay, but the gentleman that we ended up hiring, he had actually done the voice of God for the RLDS church a number of years earlier. But before you sink a lot of your personal money, make sure you do the market research to find if you have a niche or a market. And the reason is, obviously, majority of businesses fail from not having a customer. They don't do the research, or they don't have enough funding. So up front, you want to get as much data as you can, however you're going to get it. Surveys, testing at state fairs, farmers markets, whatever it is, you need the data to show investors there is a market for it. Now, even large companies mess up in their marketing research and they launch a product that fails miserably. But this will at least help you minimize the risk. And if you point that out to the investors, they appreciate that. They like that because you're taking the risk and you're testing at different levels so they can see the end result. Now, include in your business and marketing plans also a plan B and C, not just a plan A, because it'll show the investors you've thought through the concept and the plan. And I had actually come up with the idea of a Christendom Park. We named the company Christendom Publishing. And I had actually had a dream of being like Disney World, creating a park that used animated robotics to teach the Old and New Testament. This would be the first product of Christendom Publishing, and there would be other businesses spun off from this. One of them would be a theme park. Well, since that time, there have been other theme parks based on biblical teaching and stories. But this was the concept that I pitched to the investors, that this wasn't just a one-shot deal. This was a publishing firm I wanted to start, but I had a dream to build a bigger business from it. And I even had a little rendering drawn up from an architect. It's very simple, but it gave them an idea of my long-term vision. And that's what they want to see, that you've thought this through, you've done your research, and you have a dream. You have something you're shooting for, not just a one-stop deal. Okay? And if you put initial money, your own personal money, and sweat equity into the marketing research, do it for that, create a sample or a demo, and then get prospect feedback. People's feedback you can document after trying the product or service or whatever. So the investors have a really good 3D view, so to speak, almost an X-ray of how this might go. Okay, so what we did, we had talked to some churches, got some basic feedback, not real in-depth, but when we got it produced, I went to the RLDS church and I asked them, would you consider buying this, for your churches worldwide? Because we saw that churches as a market, one market. And they said, well, we don't really teach violence from the Bible. We don't kind of believe in it. And I'm like, well, if that's the case, we're throwing out half the stories because a lot of them are violent. Well, we didn't know this up front. And we went to another church group and they said, well, we think the pages need to be blank because you're showing kids this is what those characters look like. We want them to decide for themselves. And they had a problem with us, having pre-made images, for them to color. My own church was a conservative Christian church, and they didn't want to buy it for whatever reason, and it made some of our friends upset because they thought it was a great product. So it was kind of like even a prophet's not without honor except in their own home. I mean, they didn't want to buy it. So we thought, well, let's just go to the people. So one of the partners had a telemarketing firm, and he had sold TV mail order products. He fulfilled those orders, so he knew something about this. And this is mid-'80s, and there was Liberty Broadcasting that Jerry Falwell owned, and there was PTL Network Jim Baker had. So we tested first on what was called per inquiry. We made a really good 60-second TV ad and a 2-minute. We ran the 60-second ad where they would run it for no charge, but whatever sales you made, they got like 30% or something. And we got on Liberty Broadcast Network, and we sold maybe 20 each time it ran. Well, that wasn't too bad. It was encouraging. Then we went on PTL Network, and we sold 70, like 3.5 times more. So we found our niche. We ran it for 2 or 3 weeks. Now the investors were ready to put money into buying ads on that network. We done per inquiry. We got our data. We knew we had our market right there. The next day, literally, the Jim Bakker scandal broke and people quit watching his network and everything went down the toilet. I mean, just heartbreaking overnight practically. And at that point, we had some brochures left. We thought about doing some direct mailing. Bottom line was the investors had basically said, well, that's it. Sell off the product and we're done. You talk about a heartbreak. But it made me realize if we would have had a plan B and or C perhaps, and maybe had gotten enough money, more money up front, we could have still salvaged it, so to speak. But we would have presented it all up front so they'd know the options. Well, that's why including visuals, any kind of renderings, anything to show a long-term vision of growth. And again, putting your money up front, your money, in other words, into the research, a sample, and any kind of feedback you can get, packaging that for the investors. And again, don't shortcut funding up front because you might need more than you think to get a fair shot at this. And this is what we, looking back on it, thought, well, what would we have done if, maybe we would have gotten another shot at it somehow. But we were limited at that point, and we had already put several years into this. So it was a lesson learned, but these are things that are critical, really, when you first start something up, whatever the business is. If you're trying to get money, partners, people with expertise, which we had, because we had some people, particularly the telemarketing person, that had successes with his business marketing other products, and he didn't see any reason this wouldn't work. So that was a great product. We still have it. That's like the last one we have. But it's something that important lessons, critical things to do when you're starting out, lessons to be learned. John Verlin12 at AT&T.net is my email. I'd love to hear from you, your comments, thoughts, questions. And OnDemandAdvertisingSolutions.com is a website. We'll talk to you again soon.